Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson, and a warm welcome to episode 44, where we'll be talking about how to engage your senior stakeholders. Now, this came up because I have various conversations with my coaching clients, and inevitably, stakeholder engagement and management comes up at some point, whether that's to do with projects that my clients are working on, or even if they're very senior level themselves, how to manage the dynamics and the politics of different stakeholders, particularly at that senior level. And it can, of course, be a straightforward process. However, when you have stakeholders with differing views, opinions, different priorities because they have different departments and impacts from other projects they're working on, this can be challenging when you're trying to align these people behind your specific project, and it can have great impacts when it doesn't go well. In fact, it can lead to challenges with getting resources allocated. It can lead to situations where you're actually finding that there is conflict even. And certainly it can have an impact on delaying or even stopping projects in their track. So this is clearly not where we want to end up. However, when you do it well, then there is great opportunity and upside, which includes being able to deliver your project smoothly, also being able to find a way to deliver those business results. And it reflects well on you personally. It builds your personal reputation within the business or organization you're working in, and can have great impact on how you're perceived in terms of your next step for promotion. So clearly this is an area that is worth focusing on. So I have a great belief that when it comes to stakeholder management, that we want to be focused on this idea of building trust. And it starts with our intentional communication, which is where I come in. I can absolutely share here today my thoughts about how you build that communication to build the trust. So it starts from identifying who are your stakeholders. Now that might seem like a very simple, obvious question, but I would encourage you with your team to really think about all of the possible and potential stakeholders who are impacted by your project. These could be internal, they could be external, but also think about those stakeholders who are more indirect or hidden. Perhaps they're not obvious ones, but they are impacted by what you're trying to do with your specific project. Once you've done that and you're pretty clear that you've got everybody on the table, then it's really about mapping your stakeholders. Now, there are many different ways of doing this. And a very simple way, which is out there as an idea, is to take a piece of paper, divide it into 4 boxes, so a 2x2 chart, and you have influence on one axis and interest on the other. Now, you're going to map all of your stakeholders on this map. And what will come out is those people who are perhaps having low interest in your project and low influence may not be as important. They might be an inform, for example, for the project. But certainly those stakeholders who are high interest and also high influence, potentially these senior stakeholders, they are the ones that you need to engage with, to communicate with, and really plan how you're going to manage them effectively. So this will really give you the strategies around inform, consult, involve, even collaborate, very strongly involved in the project. So that mapping exercise can be very helpful to do as a team. So don't feel like you have to do that in isolation, but it will help you, give you that sense of prioritizing the key stakeholders and who are the most important ones for you to think about. Now, once you've mapped them, then we get into the next stage, which is the early engagement piece with your stakeholders. Now, ideally, you want to be doing this before the project kicks off, but let's say you're listening to this and you're halfway through a project. It still might be worthwhile taking the time to have this conversation with your stakeholder. Now, they're sometimes called stakeholder interviews, but I don't see them in this way. I see them as conversation where your focus is really on listening. And if listening is something that is challenging for you, as it is for some of us, then I have done an episode on listening in the past, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that one. Now, the point about this early engagement, the listening piece, is really making sure you understand their perspective. What's their view on this project? And what is it they're really thinking that could impact on what else they're doing? And it starts by asking some very good quality questions, open questions like what and how and where and when. But even before this stage, I always encourage people to align and make sure that there is buy-in to what your objectives are. Now, if we cannot agree about the objectives, then everything else will be harder to land. So make sure that you are absolutely clear about the question or the problem that you've defined that you're going to be solving, and you're clear on what the objectives of the project are. Now, hopefully that senior stakeholder will be absolutely aligned with that already and say, yes, get that, fantastic. But what if they're not? What if they're not even aligned with the objectives? Well, it's better to know that up front, right? So if you know that, then what you can do is potentially influence that yourself directly. Or if that is challenging, find other people to help you influence there. And I think that is quite useful to know before you even get into the project. I think also you can be exploring questions like what they need from this project versus what they want. So really defining the must-haves versus perhaps some of the more desirable elements, and really understanding as well, what advice they have for you. So don't be afraid to go into this in a more open way and saying, what do you suggest is the best way, or what advice can you give us in terms of approaching this particular project? Now, once you finish that early engagement with your key stakeholders, then you can come back together as a team and think about creating the communication plan. And I really do suggest that you spend quality time thinking about how you're going to be communicating with each of your stakeholders. Just having one approach for all of them may not be enough. You might need to take into account individual questions or challenges that they have. So set the intention. What is it you want to achieve with each of these stakeholders, and what does success look like? How do you want them to feel about your project and to support you? Then get into the detail of how and when you're going to communicate with them. Think about the frequency and how you're going to manage that, either directly from yourselves or via others. You might even within that think about the collaboration tools that you might use. How is it your senior stakeholder ideally wants to be communicated with? What is their best way to receive this information? Not just this is the way that you like to do it as a team. You might also consider questions like, what is going to be tricky here? What might come up? What issues and risks could there be? You also might think about who else might need to help you and support you in the communication plan. And then finally, I think it is really worthwhile agreeing this communication plan with your stakeholders so they have the expectation and know when you're going to be in touch and at what point during the project. There's nothing worse than a stakeholder feeling like they're in the dark, they're not sure what's going on, and perhaps even that you're deliberately keeping them in the dark. So you don't want that to be the case. Once you have this, then it's really about getting on with the project. There really are only two other points that I want to share here with you today in this episode. The first one is that when it comes to issues and challenges with a project, I have a really strong view that it is much better to be open about this and suggest solutions rather than to hide issues and hope they'll go away. So do flag issues early, have open dialogues, and you never know, some of those stakeholders can help you potentially solve those problems. Specifically as well, if you've gone in with an attitude of asking for their advice and support in this project. And then the final thing is that I think it is worthwhile to, at some key points during the project, certainly at the end of the project, to ask for feedback from your stakeholders about your communication and interaction with them. What's working? What's not working? What would they like to see more of in the future? This can be really useful insight for not only this current project, but future projects, and help you improve your engagement with your key senior stakeholders. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. So let me ask you some activation questions to help you really think about how you're going to apply this to your own context, your own projects that you work on. How are you proactively managing your stakeholders today? What type of communication planning have you put in place to make sure that you are keeping them up to date and engaged? And what part of this approach that I've shared here today is helpful for you and that you could try out next time that you're in a project planning phase? I would love to know your reflections on this. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts on this key topic. The other thing to say is that if you are somebody who is managing these kind of projects and you are very much in the flow of managing upwards towards senior stakeholders, leading teams, and also progressing your career in your organization, then I have a special offer at the moment, which is I'm offering complimentary communication assessments for anybody who wants to really get some detailed feedback about how they're doing in their communication as a leader and get some thoughts about where they're doing well and where they can improve. Now, I am offering a limited number of these spots for the next month. And so if you are interested in one of those, it's a 30-minute virtual session with me, then please contact me via my details in the show notes, or please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So once again, if you'd like one of those complimentary free communication assessments, please get in contact. And equally, if you have found today's episode helpful to you, you've had some valuable insights, it would be a great joy to me if you could share this episode with somebody else in your team, in your network, amongst your friends who would benefit from this. My mission is really to get this podcast out there to help people throughout the world to connect through the power of global communication and cultural intelligence. And by sharing this, you're really helping me on that mission. If you're feeling particularly generous today, I would absolutely love it if you could leave me a review on your podcast platform or on YouTube, leave me a comment, and even rate the show. So that would be a fantastic thing for me. So thank you so much. It really does mean that I can get the podcast out there more widely in the world. So thank you so much for joining me here today on Cultural Communication Confidence, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time.